Hello and welcome to the Governance Guru YouTube channel. Here at the Governance Guru we aim to provide practical governance tips, training and guidance to support all individuals who are involved in governance activities. Whatever role you play in governance, whether you are a minute taker, a secretary, a presenter, a member or a chair, the Governance Guru can help in sharing the information you need to support you in being the best at what you do. So, what are minutes? Meeting minutes are a written summary or record of what is said or decided at a meeting. In this session, we will share top tips on how to create great informal minutes and explain essential actions to take before, during, and after meetings. What makes minutes good? I've been taking minutes for 20 years at various meetings of various levels, from team meetings all the way up to boards. And in my view, good minutes convey in a clear and concise way what happened or what was discussed and agreed during a meeting to someone who was not in attendance. Good minutes should summarize, but they should not transcribe what occurred at a meeting. There are a couple of methods of minute taking. You can take minutes by hand, and for informal meetings this may be appropriate for you if it's a short meeting with few attendees. My preferred method in my 20 years of minute taking is typewriting minutes. It means that you have a first draft immediately available after the meeting to share or to edit, and it just makes things a lot easier. So there are 4 steps to minute taking. The first is preparation. Preparation is vital. The second is writing the minutes themselves. The third is editing the minutes. And the fourth is sharing, approving if that's relevant to you, and saving the minutes appropriately. Preparation is vital. It's important that you know the expectations of you before you go into the meeting. If the meeting is not your own, if you're taking minutes for somebody else, make sure you speak to the chair and understand what they're expecting of the meeting and of you and of the minutes themselves, so you can go in and be prepared. If there is an agenda for the meeting, and there should be for all meetings, make sure you familiarise yourself with the agenda, and if there are materials, so if slides are being shared or information is being shared in writing before the meeting, make sure you've read that so you understand the subject matter which is being discussed. Before the meeting, make sure you check who you're expecting to attend, so you should have an attendee list, and particularly if there are any decisions to be made, you need to ensure that you have a quorum. So a quorum is the minimum required number of attendees for the meeting to go ahead. We would recommend that you create a template for your minutes. Even for informal meetings, it can make things much easier for you and make things go much more smoothly in the meeting for you and whilst you're taking minutes, if you already have a basic template set up before the meeting that you can just enter your information into. And we'll share some more information about creating a template and how to do that over the next couple of slides. The last thing is make sure your laptop is charged. If you're typewriting minutes, you will need a fully charged laptop. The worst thing that can happen is that you lose connection or that you lose power whilst you're trying to take minutes. Avoid the stress, make sure you're prepared, make sure your devices are charged and ready. So creating a template. We recommend here that you include the meeting name, the date of the meeting, the time of the meeting, the location of the meeting if that's relevant. It may not be relevant for an informal meeting. You might want to note if it was over Zoom or in person, and if it was in person you could note the address or the meeting room name or the building location. You should include an attendee list, name and surname, and their title if that's appropriate. You should briefly note the agenda topics. Here we've used bullet points to call out the topics that were discussed. And you should note any decisions or actions which happened during the meeting. This is a good record for anybody that was not in attendance, so they can quickly read through excuse me, and understand what was discussed and what was decided. So what should you bring to the meeting? We would recommend taking, again, a fully charged laptop. Also bring your charger, bring a notebook or some paper and 2 working pens. Always bring with you the agenda, of course, so you can follow through as you go along through the meeting, and bring the meeting materials if there are any. For your comfort, we would suggest something to drink, maybe some water and some tissues. On the day of the meeting itself, we recommend that you use the bathroom before you join the meeting. You want, for your own comfort, to be able to sit through the entire meeting, but also you want to have complete minutes. So if you need to get up and leave the room to use the bathroom, you'll be missing a section of the meeting, and therefore your minutes will be incomplete, potentially. So use the bathroom before you join the meeting. Arrive early. So if you are joining via video conference or telephone, dial in or join slightly earlier to make sure your own technology is working and that you have a connection there. It also gives you time to sort out any technological difficulties you may have. If you are joining the meeting in person, arrive early to the room, hopefully before the other attendees. This means you can pick a good seat in the room, and personally I would recommend choosing a seat within eye line of the door so you can see who is coming in and going out, and if possible near to any technology. So if there is a screen which controls the video conference or the telephone line, you want to be close to that. And also this is a great opportunity when you arrive early to check that technology is working, so to check that the room is connecting to the phone line or to the video conference line, to check that attendees can hear you and that they're connected. It means that you can take your time, set up calmly and do all the necessary checks before the meeting starts. This means also that you've got your good seat now, you can see people when they come in and you can tick them off as they join. So again, you feel calmer, you feel more in control. Understanding who is who. This is an interesting one. It's unlikely that you will be unfamiliar with all attendees, but it might be that people attend and you don't know who they are, especially if you're only there to take minutes and you haven't arranged the meeting itself. So in this case, there are a few things you can do to help yourself. Obviously, you'll need to be recording potentially certain comments that have been made by certain people, so you will need eventually to know who is who. Our top tips in this case are, first of all, before the meeting you should have the list of attendees. So if you have some sort of global address book or SharePoint site, intranet site where you can look people up and just get familiar with their face, so you can recognize them when they come into the room, that's very helpful. If you don't have that opportunity or you've been asked to do the minutes at the last minute, just ask the chair if they can help you, perhaps welcoming people by name as they enter the room or join the call or video conference. You can also ask the chair to take a roll call, or you yourself can take a roll call, or you can ask people to announce themselves as they join. If people are joining by video conference, always remind them to make sure their full name is visible on the screen. They should be able to amend that from their end. And if you're sitting in the room in person, I find it helpful if I'm unfamiliar with the attendees to draw a seating plan. So you may know a couple of people in the room, make sure you've got their names and you know where you're sitting, and then it's easier afterwards. You can say, oh, this person said such and such and they were sitting next to you or sitting next to Joe Bloggs or whatever. So there are our top tips on understanding who is who in a meeting. Now we'll move on to sharing our top tips on writing the minutes themselves. You are now in the meeting itself taking your minutes. You are fully prepared, you have your template set up, and you're going to type straight into your template. At this point, you'll be looking at the agenda items and adding a little bit of detail under each one. You should be capturing high-level discussion points, so not a verbatim transcript of what was said, but at a high level, what the discussion was around and the outcomes of that discussion. So if any decisions are made or any approvals are made, you should note this in the minutes. If anyone disagreed with the decision or the approval that took place, you should note that in the minutes. And if anything was proposed for approval or for a decision, but that approval or decision was declined, you should note the rationale for that. So why was this not approved, and is there any action coming out of that? On that note, any actions or escalations coming out of the meeting should be written down in the minutes. You should be noting here the owner of the action, so who is to complete the action, who is to go away and do whatever it is to be done and bring information back to that group. Note their name, note the due date, and it should be made clear in the meeting what the due date of that action is. If not, you can ask the chair after the meeting. And within the action or escalation, just note a brief summary of what is to happen. So and so is to go away and pull a report together to bring back and share with the team, for example. Or the chair is to take X item for escalation to their manager for discussion and report back to the group on what their manager said, as an example. Please note you should not be regurgitating the materials in the minutes. So if people are reading from slides, you do not need to capture that information in the minutes. It's already in the materials. Just as a precaution, it's good to set your laptop to save the minutes at regular intervals. It's very hard after the meeting sometimes to recall everything that you had noted down if you lose the version that you typed out during the meeting. And again, just as a precaution, save the document immediately at the end of the meeting and email it to yourself. This way you definitely have a copy. It's in your inbox, even if you can't find it in your documents. And remember, practice makes progress. We'll now move on to our top tips for editing minutes. So the meeting is over, you've gone and had a quick break, perhaps a long break, to separate yourself from the meeting for a minute, get some fresh air, have a drink, have something to eat, and you come back to your laptop and now you need to edit the minutes so that they're appropriate to share with the attendees. First of all, we recommend saving your first draft as version 1 and then save a second draft as version 2 that you will now edit. This means, again, as a precaution, you always have your first draft to go back to should anything happen to the second draft. And we remind you here, minutes must be accurate, objective, clear, and complete. Let's look at our top tips for editing minutes. What are the do's and don'ts of editing minutes? First of all, definitely do check your spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Unless you're an excellent typist, it's quite likely that there will be some spelling, grammar, and punctuation errors. And it's quite hard often to see our own errors, especially when we've read and reread the same information many times. I would recommend in this case either asking a third party to read the minutes for you just to make sure they make sense and the message comes across clearly, or by using some of the many new technologies that are available. You can even have the computer read the minutes back to you so you can hear any inaccuracies there. Incorrect spelling, grammar, or punctuation can also impact the meaning of what you're typing, so it's really good to make sure that this is how you intend it to be before you share it with anybody else. Secondly, you should be summarising lengthy discussions. So these are informal meeting minutes that you're capturing. So really you just want maybe 1 or 2 sentences to summarise each discussion. If there are any particular points that the chair wanted captured, by all means capture these, but you should not be creating a verbatim transcript of what was said during the meeting. Thirdly, as we mentioned previously, you should be confirming details of actions and escalations. This is important to have as a record, but it's important to be able to share this with anybody who is the owner of an action or an escalation, so they are clear on what they need to do following the meeting. If something was discussed, perhaps some subject matter you're not familiar with, or perhaps someone was talking about numbers or dates and you didn't quite capture all of the information, or you don't feel like you captured it accurately, feel free to go back to the presenter to clarify the detail. So you're not asking them to regurgitate what they said, but you might say, I know you mentioned the numbers from the last quarter, I didn't quite capture what they were, please could you share them with me? And you can include them in the minutes. Consider the audience and the phrasing. And so by this we mean who will be seeing these minutes? Who will these minutes be made available to? Are they confidential? Will they be available to regulators? How does the phrasing come across? Does it come across as inflammatory? It should be reading as a neutral account of what occurred in the meeting. So try not to use inflammatory language. Try and be neutral and clear and concise in the way you phrase things. Again, we've said, use neutral language. You are not adding your own emotion or opinion to this writing. This is a neutral account of what occurred. And when you're writing minutes, you should always use past tense. It was a meeting that occurred, you're writing about it, it happened in the past, you use past tense to discuss it. What you should not do, again, you don't need to create a verbatim transcript. If they wanted a verbatim transcript, they perhaps would have recorded the meeting. You shouldn't be regurgitating the materials in the minutes. So if people have presented slides and read through the slides in the minutes, you don't need to recapture what was already written in the materials. You should be capturing the discussion points. You should not be referring to individuals from clients or from regulators by name. So you could perhaps mention the name of the regulator or the name of the company, but you shouldn't be referring to individual names. Again, I would refer to your own company policy on this, but usually it's the case that you shouldn't be talking about individuals specifically. And again, refer to your company policy, but you should not usually be including privileged, restricted or confidential supervisory information in minutes. Finally, we're going to look at sharing, approving and saving your minutes. So sharing minutes should happen via the approved medium. Often this is email for most companies, or it might be another sort of software. Make sure you're familiar with whatever policy or procedure your company has around this and follow that procedure or policy. It's always good to share the minutes as soon as possible after the meeting so it's fresh in everybody's mind. For informal meetings, especially if they're very short, you should be sharing these the same day or perhaps the day after if you're very busy that day. But the sooner the better, so that any actions and escalations are also shared and anyone who didn't attend can familiarise themselves with what was discussed at the meeting. Usually for informal meetings, approval of minutes is not required, but do check your policy or procedure documents just to make sure what the requirements are around this. If approval is required, generally minutes should be approved at the next scheduled meeting, and the approval of the minutes should be documented in the next meeting's minutes, so there's a record of this. In some instances, I've seen minutes be approved offline, so via email or another software or modality. Again, check your policy or procedure document to see what's required and what's appropriate for you. And finally, you should be saving the minutes to a secure folder and make sure you retain them for the required amount of time. So again, your company should have a retention schedule that you can refer to to give you information around this. All other drafts of the minutes, unless retention is required by your company policy or procedure, should be deleted. Usually there's only one final version of the minutes. This is the approved version if approval is required. And so there should only be one version. So there's only one version of the truth. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us at the Governance Guru YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, share it with your minute-taking friends, and join us next time for more practical governance guidance and top tips.